Davis. I'm PennLive's outreach and opinion editor, and this is another editorial board meeting for PennLive and the Patriot News. Today's topic, I think, is one that I think will find consensus that this is one of the most important issues facing our nation. Everyone has to be concerned about gun violence and guns in schools and the safety of our children. And so we have called Ask CeaseFire PA, which has basically declared this a public health crisis, to come in and talk about it, talk about what at the beginning of a new school year, what they're concerned about. And also, I mean, what could possibly be some ways of addressing and dealing with something that I think is dear to all of us. But before we get started, let me acknowledge that we have members of our editorial board here: Benny Portline, Jeff Lord, Reverend Sandy Strauss. We also have, I think I saw David Dixie. I don't see him on camera, but he's with us. We have Rajette Harris, also not on camera, but she is here with us. And Saeed Onal, a member of our board and a very successful businessman in our area. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I think I've acknowledged everyone on our board. I'm going to turn it over to CeaseFire PA, and I don't know who's going to take the reins for you, but Adam, I'll turn it over to you, and you can introduce who you have here with us.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us. It's always good to be with you and see some friends over the years. I run CeaseFire PA, the state's gun violence prevention group. We work every single day to ensure everyone in Pennsylvania can live a life free from gun violence, where they feel and are safe so they can thrive. I'm joined by my colleague, Carla Reyes, who leads Pennsylvania Health Professionals to End Gun Violence and supports a coalition of doctors and nurses and medical organizations who understand this crisis in an intimate way, because they are often dealing with the aftermaths of gun violence. And then I'll let Dr. Sean Stafford introduce himself. Sean, you're muted.
Pleasure meeting you all. Thank you, Adam. We've been doing this for years, and I still haven't gotten it quite right. But real pleasure meeting with you all. So my name's Sean Stafford. I'm a pediatric surgeon. I'm also the president of the American Trauma Society of Pennsylvania, and a close collaborator with CeaseFire, as well as the coalition group. So I've been in not just a pediatric surgeon, but actually a person who grew up in this community. And so I was raised, born, my wife's from here, spent some time in the military, but have come back to this region with a passion and really understanding the impact of this gun violence and all. We'll go further, but I really appreciate this opportunity to chat with you all.
Thank you.
So I'll get us started here, and then Sean has some remarks to add from his perspective, and we look forward to the conversation. I mean, already hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvania children have started to head back to school. In total, there'll be about 1.7 million kids and students going back to school this year across the Commonwealth. And I think when they should be focused on learning, on the complications of maybe being a teenager or meeting their new classmates or even going into a new school, and the teachers should be worried about how to best make sure that they can learn in algebra and what they're going to read in literature class. The reality is they have to learn something else, and they're taught often to duck, how to run, how to hide, and how to fight. And this is because of a uniquely American public health crisis. And while we've declared it as such, it's not just us, it's the former U.S. Surgeon General and the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Medical Association, who've all said, and I'm pretty sure that American Trauma Society have all said, this is a public health crisis in our schools for our children and beyond. And it's a preventable one. When we talk about school violence, I just want to touch on a few pieces. Often I think we think about the most horrific cases of gun violence, the mass shootings at a Uvalde or a Sandy Hook that capture national attention, that are horrific and take the lives of children and teachers across the country. Most school violence is actually very different. It is at a baseball game or a basketball or a football game. There were 49 acts of shootings at football games last year across the United States. It's within a block or two as kids are leaving or getting back to the school. It is, sometimes a gun in school for sure, but it is all of those pieces that have created a fear and a concern that ripples throughout the community. and that the loss of life we're experiencing as the #1 cause of kids' death really extends beyond that. The research shows that it has deep mental and emotional impacts on kids that impact their not only personal emotional states and mental health states, but their ability to learn, their educational attainment. Because if you're worried about being shot, if you're worried about the friend you just lost, how do you go in and study geometry? How do you go in and learn to read? And so the consequences, the ripple effects of the crisis are really larger. We want to come back to some solutions in a moment, but I want to hand it to Sean. As a pediatric surgeon, as someone who works intimately, I often turn to my doctors who better understand the scope of this crisis, frankly, than I do as a policy advocate. And so, Sean?
Yeah. So really, and again, just to drive home some of the things that Adams has just said, I'm a pediatric surgeon. I take care of these children on a day-to-day basis. I see the impact of not just the beginnings of the school violence, but what it happens to that child and their family and the community. But I'm also here as a father. I'm a father of 4 children. My wife's a teacher. My brother's a teacher. I know what they talk about every day about what do we do if a shooter comes into my school. I mean, imagine, again, we all look like we're a little long in the tooth on the phone here. We didn't have that thought process when going to school as children. And I think as we've gotten older, that was never part of our algorithm as our teachers and students going into schools. And so it is overlying every day. My daughter the other day said, hey, and she goes to one of the local high schools and said, Dad, our cafeteria door is lodged open. She was petrified. Imagine what would have been maybe a kid skipping school one day was actually now turning into terror for a group of girls sitting in their high school cafeteria. And so it is impactful. And to drive home the point, as a pediatric surgeon, I take care of illness every day, illness that we can't control, illness that's out of our hands. The #1 cause of death, and this cannot be overstated, in children is gun violence. Just think about that for a moment. That is the #1 cause of death in children. That's preventable. That doesn't have to happen.
And Dr. Safford, that's such a striking statement there. And I want to make sure we're understanding it. We're not just talking about low income, Black, brown. We're talking about children of all stripes and economic classes.
Irrespective of guns know no economic class, they don't know color, they don't know where you're from. That bullet doesn't care, and all of these communities are affected. And to Adam's point, there's different, and it's part of the problem with gun violence. We talk about gun violence, and as you just hinted at, Ms. Davis, we just think about inner city, low income. It's across the board. It's suicides. It's older, and again, as a pediatric surgeon, I focus on children, but let's take this more broadly for older individuals, for hunting accidents, it can span the spectrum of being thoughtful. And it goes back to why this should not be a partisan issue. It's just a safety issue for children. And how do we actually protect our children from gun violence? And, within the ATSPA, we've talked about these very specific options. And again, Adam will probably go into these as well, but having secure storage, trying to make sure that the guns can't be accessed by children who shouldn't have them. What are the school safety measures that we can have without creating a militarization zone? We don't want to create, you think about freedom and safety, freedom and security. People think about those as counterposing portions of it. We don't have to. We can create safe environments for children that doesn't make them feel that there's police at the front door. I did my medical school in Philly, and I was in West Philly, and walking to med school one day, they had put in all of the metal detectors, and the line was down the road for these poor kids just trying to go to school. And this little kid looked at me and goes, I just want to go to school. I don't want to get on a plane. And it really makes that, we need to stop having that part of their lives. And then part of that is also mental health. What are we doing for these children's mental health? COVID has severely impacted us. And again, I'm going to on my soapbox, but telephones, these cell phone usages, and we've stopped having the relationships. All of these things have led to a mental health crisis in children. so far beyond, but it attaches to these gun violence issues. And then you look at kind of, with an ATSPA, we're looking at gun violence. It's really tough to put your finger on out there. We don't collect the data on these things. If we had a kid's cancer that was killing as many kids as gun violence is, we'd have NIH funding, NSF funding, we'd have all the government in the world trying to help a kid with cancer. But because these kids aren't necessarily kind of embraced, or it becomes political, we're not looking at what the data are. Where can we make a benefit? And then finally, as this conversation is having it, community partnerships. We need to come together as groups. And again, it doesn't matter where you're from, who you are. No one wants to be unsafe. No one wants their children to be unsafe. No one personally wants to be unsafe. And so we need to work together to make this a unified statement of safety. It doesn't have, the NRA and these different groups that are pro-guns, they can be partners with us on how to make this stuff safer. And as a physician, again, I try to be as apolitical as possible. But when you look at a mom's face and you told her son's died from a gunshot wound because it wasn't stored properly, it'll affect you for the rest of your life.
Thank you, Dr. Stafford. That laid out. Although I'll tell you, one of the issues that, I mean, how can we regulate gun safety? I mean, we already have laws mandating gun safety in the home, right? So, that is one of the, what more can be done? Adam, you were shaking your head. Is that, you think that's not really enough, or what?
Yeah, I mean, just on the secure storage piece, we don't have a statewide requirement in Pennsylvania that you secure your firearm. Sometimes individuals get processed under childhood endangerment laws, but it's quite rare and it's pretty hard. I think of it like seatbelt laws, right? We don't want to get to the place that we are, and in fact, we don't. We created a societal norm around seatbelts, right? But secure storage laws would say you have to your firearm either in all conditions except when you're using it, when it's like in your hand in possession, or if there's a child in the home. And the ideal here is twofold. It shifts the kind of cultural expectations towards secure storage. It creates a norm around that, and it also creates a consequence on the back end. You don't want to get to that consequence, and it, in most states, I think it's rarely actually used, but what it has done is driven up secure storage. And that has a lot of value, not only in terms of the home violence, but in terms of the school violence we're talking about. In the case of most school shootings, and not again only the big mass shootings, but the localized shootings near a school among youth, in more than 80% of cases, the kids get the guns from a family member or friend, right? And so if you just have that secured somewhere where they can't easily access it, then you're taking that away. So we think, as an example, secure storage is a big part of the solution, and it's both about a law and, the General Assembly moving on. I think there's other things that can be done, to create that norm. To give a few examples here, I mean, one is on a personal level. I took my kid to a play date the other week. She's 7. And, I hadn't been to that person's house. They met at camp. So I texted beforehand and I said, hey, my kid has no food allergies. She's slightly afraid of dogs. And are there any guns in the house? If so, are they secure? And the parent wrote back, no, good on the allergies. There is a dog. Is it going to be okay? And we don't have a firearm. And I said, the dog will be fine. So, right, normalizing that safety conversation just like we do in the pediatric place. I took her for her checkup and I got a questionnaire about firearms, there too from my healthcare provider, CHOP, because I live in Philadelphia. There's other places within the schools. Can schools become centers of secure storage? Putting it in the honor code or in the school handbook to encourage or require secure storage as an expectation of safety within the community. If we're going to force our kids to walk through metal detectors, let's first, and we really shouldn't do that for a bunch of reasons, let's first say, hey, can everyone make sure if you have a firearm, that's great, secure it because it's going to help keep yours and other students safe. So I think there's also some ways as a society and as our schools can help encourage. And then the public health system, I mean, Sean, you want to talk about this, but many healthcare systems have adopted secure storage practices as part of the intake process in pediatric practices and elsewhere.
Yeah, that does address at the adult hospital. So I will tell you, there are screenings and this is a group out of Philadelphia, which has kind of helped provide these screenings of ways of actually talking about this in your primary care setting. And again, to use the seatbelt correlation, which is, I will tell you, the other day I'd got in my car and I was kind of fiddling with my seatbelt, and my daughter turned and goes, "Hey, where's your seatbelt?" That's what we want. That's what we want to get to, is that it's a normalization for our children to recognize when you come home from hunt. And again, we're hunters. And again, I say this as a gun owner, but our weapons are stored. We have separation of from our weapons, from our bullets. We have very specific areas that my entire family, from little to old, knows what that was supposed to look like. What we want to do is create an environment that our children are keeping us maybe sometimes, and saying, "Hey, there's a gun out. Why we need to put away our guns, Dad, and put them away and secure them." So you make that a normalization. I think that then takes away this, again, a political trigger that can occur, that we're not trying to take people's guns away. We just want them not to be used for unintended purposes. And I think everyone can agree to that. No one wants an unintended purpose, an unintended use of their weapon. And so, similarly in the military, it's a very normalization of, you come back, you secure your storage, you secure your weapons, you move forward. We can make that part of a common conversation. And I think that's, again, what this kind of organization can do, is talk about that as a way we can come together to be thoughtful and drive this to not being the most common cause of death in a child. And that includes car accidents, bicycle accidents, everything.
Mm. Well, Carla, I think I saw you nodding your head. Did you want to add something to what's already been stated here?
No, just wonderful points all around. This is such a wonderful conversation. And yeah, thank you for having us.
Well, let me just, before I open it up to our editorial board, they always have such insightful questions. I'll say what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing from you is that this is not about take away guns. This is not about draconian efforts to, outlaw the Second Amendment. I mean, this is about simple gun safety, especially when it comes to children. But I guess the first question I would have is there bipartisan support, at least from what you can see in Pennsylvania's legislature, to come together to address this issue as we start the new school year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to start the question outside the legislature, because I think what happens within the legislature kind of warps our perspective. Polling a few years ago saw the vast majority of Pennsylvania support secure storage, support things like extremist protection orders or universal background check, and that included majority support among gun owners and among conservative, self-identified conservatives and Republicans. And so when we talk about this across Pennsylvania, and this mirrors my conversations, we're working heavily in the Northeast, where I am right now, in the Poconos, around suicide prevention. We see a lot of support. When it goes to Harrisburg, I think, as we all know, it shifts a little bit, and it becomes definitely more partisan. We saw 3 gun safety bills last session with bipartisan support. Secure storage isn't one of them. But I think what we should hold on to is that keeping our children safe is bipartisan. That whether you voted for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, whether you voted Republican or Democrat, whatever your party registration is, we all love our children, our grandchildren, our friends' kids, whatever it is. And we want them to be safe, and that is like a primary obligation, maybe the first of government. And so I think as long as we focus on that, I believe we'll eventually get to the policy side and move those policies. Unfortunately, I think we're going to lose too many children along the way.
Reverend Strauss, you have your hand up.
Yes. Hi, Adam. How are you?
Hi, Reverend Strauss. How are you? I'm good.
I wanted to ask because, I know this from my own experience. There are still a lot of hardcore people who will say, oh, anything like this is just on the slippery slope. They're looking to take our guns away. Are there any other arguments other than protecting our children, which you would hope they would respond to,
Yeah.
that would possibly be useful in those cases where you do have these really hardcore folks?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of have two answers, I guess. I mean, I think one is that is not the majority. I think we get couched into this ideal of the extreme NRA gun owners of America talking points being the core of gun owners. And you heard Sean say he's a gun owner. We have my board chair is a gun owner, right? Most gun owners, their parents first, their friends first, etc. And so I'm always cognizant of how it warps the conversation a little bit, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that piece. It doesn't really answer it. I think the answer is the slippery slope argument. It has to be disproven in the world that there are 400 million guns in this country, right? Like in a world where we have so many guns, more guns than people, in a world where all these pieces are true and we aren't safe or we're less safe, I think there's a point at which you kind of have to say, well, show me the slippery slope if you 400 million guns in this country, and then say, look, let's come together on evidence-based solutions because our kids aren't safer.
Very good.
But again, yeah, it's hard with those individuals.
Go ahead,
To
Dr.
take that a step further, to take that a step further, it's interesting is that, and I can tell you just the conversations we have amongst family members and some of the recent convictions that have been had. One of the conversations we have amongst our groups, where it's hunting groups up in North Central PA, and we're talking about this, is that gun owners are being responsible for what their guns are doing, which is the other argument to secure your weapon, which is if my child goes out and uses my gun for an untoward purpose, I can be held responsible for that gun and what has happened to it. And so I can tell you, bringing it to your point, which is why do I care? It's a slippery slope. Don't take my gun. Hey, here's the reason. Don't do this because you don't want to be held responsible for what an unsecured weapon has done. And so that can actually make a big difference in that conversation of, maybe I'm not being as empathetic to as I needed to be to a child dying from a gun because my gun's not going to do that. But if your gun is used for unintended purposes and all of a sudden you can be held responsible, that's a really good reason to secure your gun.
Jeffrey, I see your hand up. Go ahead. Jeffrey, are you there? Yeah, go ahead. You can unmute. You have to unmute, Jeffrey. You see it? Okay.
How's that? How's that?
That's good. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, my question is, you can't get on an airplane in this day and age without going through a magnetometer. Is there, what is the status with schools? It would seem to me that would be an obvious thing to do to make sure that nobody enters the building with a gun in the first place.
It's interesting. If you
some schools,
we've reviewed some of these data again through ETSPA, looking at some of these mass shootings. A majority of the school shootings aren't coming through the front door with a weapon in hand. It's the stuff like my daughter was talking about, that the cafeteria door was slightly ajar. It's all of these holes in the system that make it that some of these mass shootings occur in Florida. And again, and time again, it's usually the Swiss cheese of reduction of error. Same thing occurs within school systems. And so again, it's that creating, again, we need to create an environment that the children feel safe. They don't have to feel like they're going through that security system. And again, the majority of these kids aren't doing it through the front door. They're doing it side doors and back doors and through alternate means. So it's that optimal location of creating a safe environment for children. Meanwhile, also trying to make things as secure as possible with those. And so it does take a community, and And again, just having seen, again, my brother's the social studies teacher at E-Town, and just seeing the transition over the last 20 years of what of a shoot, and these drills, and it's a constant source, but that's an evolving practice, and I don't know if we've created a best answer other than let's make sure those weapons are minimizing their chances of getting in the wrong hands. Adam, sorry to interrupt you, I think.
Vinny,
No,
I think
that
you have
was
your
great.
hand
I
up.
think,
Oh, sorry, Adam, you still wanted to have something on that? Go ahead.
well, I would just add, I think, in addition, I just want to keep back to the shootings happen also around the schools, right? Nick Elzaldi in Philadelphia, which received national attention, he was shot at a football game, as he was leaving a football training. So these metal detectors and such won't solve for a significant portion of the violence that, happens around the schools, and they are just as impactful at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we have so many different aspects to this gun violence. We have, as you pointed out, just the accidents that would happen in the home. We have the suicide threats. We have the kids stealing it and bringing maybe it to school. We have the mass shootings, and we have crime. I mean, it's almost sometimes overwhelming. But go ahead, Vinny. Let's get your question in.
Well, that's exactly what my question was going to be. How many children die in school or outside of school with these guns? It seems to me that these detectors aren't going to solve the problem of gun deaths and disabilities from gunshots. I mean, not all children die, and some of them become disabled. And so there has to be a wider solution than detectors, which, I'm not saying they don't help, but overall, it's just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to know, Dr. Safford, it's the number one cause of death for children, but among the things we've listed, the accidents, the crime, which is the worst for children? Mass shootings or what?
So assault, so not mass shootings, but assault is about 2/3. 15% is suicide, and then 15% is unintended. So a grand majority of them are assault situations. Inside the school, it represents probably about half of or around the school, or within the school setting, we'll say half to 60%. And then again, those are broken down into accidental ones, and and where suicides, and it's kind of where there's assault that's occurring. But again, it's the number.
I'm sorry, we're
It's
breaking up
approximately
there.
57 shootings. There's approximately 50. If you break it down to the number of shootings, not deaths, is that an average of 57 shootings occur every day near school locations. Just again, every day. And that includes bus stops, nearby street, like in surrounding adjacent schools. 57 shootings occur every day.
I know this is an editorial statement, but that's truly that's a horrendous thing to say, that American children in a country that's great are having to face this on a daily basis. That doesn't.
I was in the Navy. We didn't have. I was in the Navy. We didn't have 57 shootings a day in country. It's shocking. We have a war zone around our schools.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. So we're to the point here of asking. You clearly have your eyes and ears and everything focused on this issue. What are your solutions? What would you like to see done now?
Yeah, well, I think as we talked about, secure storage is our top goal when we think about keeping kids safe. It prevents a lot of the ways children get access to firearms for these attacks of all forms, as Sean just mentioned. It prevents firearm suicide, which is growing among youth, and we haven't even talked about that aspect. And it prevents honestly trafficking of guns, because many more guns are getting stolen out of cars. And so this is a solution that would work, and that needs to happen at both the policy level of the General Assembly, which is what we like to editorialize on, moving forward quickly and finding a bipartisan approach to it. And, I think there's a significant opportunity for school systems to explore how do they educate and encourage parents to understand the impact secure storage can have to keep kids safe, as they talk about all the ways that they're keeping their students safe. So that is like at the top of the list. I think that there are some other solutions that will help, but I would put secure storage right there. I don't know, Sean, if you have anything else you'd add there or other pieces.
Yeah. And again, there's very clear correlation between having child access prevention, secure storage laws. So when they have done those in states that have done that, there's been about a 20% reduction in childhood deaths in those states when those laws come about. And so that is one of my personal, and with ATSPA, is actually creating child access protection laws that would be through the legislature to actually create, houses where there are children present, having that secure storage being mandated. And then similarly, that with PA laws of having someone responsible for their weapon. So if it is my weapon, it is my responsibility. Those two parts are kind of a carrot and stick aspect of gun prevention. But most importantly is that safe storage aspect has clear research-driven reduction in childhood deaths when those laws come about, and doesn't affect the number of people owning guns.
All right. Is there a bill in the legislature now that we can refer to? Has anything been proposed?
Yeah. The Representative Chairman Tim Briggs of the Judiciary has a bill. I think it's still just in co-sponsorship form, as they, which is like the first step in the process. But they're considering exploring it for the fall. So that would be the bill that we would encourage you to do. I think it's getting introduced technically any day now, but the co-sponsor memo's out, and I will send it along. And that is the secure storage bill that we're talking about here.
If you could send me any information on that bill at all, just so I have everything accurate, that would be helpful. Okay. And I do want to see that site. Saeed, do you want to ask your own question, or you want me to read it? What do you want to do?
Thank you so much, Joyce. Well, I did write it down, not to take time, but this whole idea of making those people accountable, the gun owners, to keep their guns safe. It doesn't look like, I'm not sure if there is, but there's enough accountability and maybe a penalty that is going to be actually keep them safe. This legislative bill, does that include that? So the gun owners should have that kind of responsibility, and the consequences should be heavy enough, just not, something to not stop them doing what they're doing. And also, I want to know if there is a possibility. I'm sure those families, their children took their gun and killed somebody, are devastated as a result. I'm sure they're not sitting and saying that, hey, it happened. Hopefully, right? If that is the case, there's a different problem. But would those families be participant in an advocation of this preventive measures? Like, would they be used saying, hey, you know what, we didn't do this on time, we didn't keep it safe, and here's what happened, and now we lost our kid and other children as a result? So is there something like that, or do you think that can be something added on?
No, I think those are great questions, Pete. So on the first part of your question, this is what a secure storage bill would do. It would create that requirement for responsible gun ownership, and it has, a consequence depending on the severity of the violation, from misdemeanor to, if the gun is used to harm someone else, it can be a felony, and that'd be obviously left up to the district attorney to decide. So we've got to pass that gun safety bill. Right now, all you can do is charge the parents, and it happens sometimes with child negligence, with negligence. That is a high bar to follow and often is not done. I would say also, kind of going into the second part of your question, we have seen some of those cases happen here in Pennsylvania, and they haven't transformed gun owners' approach. So we think the more proactive requirement will actually lead to more transformation. A lot of the families do get involved with secure storage campaigns afterwards, generally around the lens of handing out secure storage devices. We give out, as a society, whether it's law enforcement, hospitals, and other places, a lot of secure storage devices. And I think at this stage, while we should continue those efforts, we need more to get people to understand that there's real consequences if they don't use them, because the uptake has not been significant enough to curtail the violence. And so again, that's where we're coming back to. Let's make a proactive policy that holds people accountable for not securing their firearms, rather than waiting for someone to be injured and then seeing if there's going to be a charge during usually what's the worst moment of that person's life, frankly. And so that's why we think the secure storage bill is a good way to go. And it has been really effective in other states.
Adam, there was a lot of attention paid I think just recently to that. Weren't there two cases where parents were held liable when their kid did some sort of shooting? What's the status of that? Is that something that could be brought to Pennsylvania as well?
So yeah, you're probably talking about the Michigan school shooting that happened a few years ago, and I'm blanking on the other one, but there have been a few really high-profile national ones. I will say in those cases, the facts of the case were a little, at times, unique. I think in the Michigan case, the parent gave the child the firearm rather than the child going and getting the firearm. They enabled the access. If I remember correctly, though, I should check that. And I think in those cases, it gets a lot easier. In most cases, what you're dealing with, is an unsecured gun. The child either, if it's a young child, in the case of unintentional shootings, we just had this in Philly, and you've had this in Harrisburg, playing, not realizing it's loaded, not realizing the consequences, and then shooting and hurting, or God forbid, killing another child or someone else. Or taking the firearm, maybe for feelings of safety, for a set of reasons, but not informing the parents. And we have seen some parents charged in those cases with childhood endangerment, but it is a more challenging case to make for sure. And it has not created the same attention on not just if you intentionally give your kid the gun, that's illegal, that's a problem. But how do you deal with it when the kid knows there's an unsecured gun and decides to take it? And that's where that mandatory secure storage steps in.
Okay. So mandatory secure storage is number one for you. Go ahead, Saeed. I'm sorry.
Well, this second part of my question was about the families affected, both sides, gun owners or they lost a child. If they're on the billboards all around Pennsylvania on TV ads and saying, look, if I did this, this wouldn't happen. That will create a pressure on legislators and both sides, saying that maybe we should now do something about this common sense. This is really ridiculous. We lose number one. Death of a kid is a gun violence, and we can't stop that.
I would say, I think it would definitely help create more pressure. We'd be very interested in launching such a campaign. A lot of our work is focused on organizing the public and doctors and nurses. We haven't done a billboard campaign in a while. I will also just note on secure storage outside of the legislative realm. For y'all's knowledge, this is more in firearm suicide, so a little bit of a different aspect, but the PA Commission on Crime and Delinquency currently has a RFP out, a request for proposal around secure storage and firearm suicide. That's due in a few weeks. and I think PCCD and the new Office of Gun Violence Prevention, who has a new director, is really thinking about how do they address firearm suicide as well as other forms of gun violence. And when you think about secure storage, it really goes hand in hand, both suicide and keeping kids safe in school. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that'd be great. I'd love to chat more about it. And I think we need to raise more pressure. And that's why this editorial from the PennLive Editorial Board is really helpful as we continue to push these policies forward.
So Adam, am I right that you guys have not had a concerted effort to reach out to families who've been impacted by gun violence, including those that are perhaps vulnerable or guilty to being having caused it, correct? You've not actually done a targeted campaign there.
Oh, sorry, I was doing a poor job answering. We work really closely with a lot of family members who've been impacted by gun violence. I will say that it depends a little bit. Some of them want to stay very private and not get engaged this way. It's really hard. And some want to get more involved. And I would say we have had less success engaging individuals who especially are involved in unintentional shootings or whose child was the perpetrator. I think there's a lot of guilt often associated with it. And my answer on this is I understand as a parent why they feel guilty. But for us, this is a systematic failure. It's a policy failure. We have designed systems, and other places where we have systems that threaten people's health and safety, we step in. We made driving the car so much safer. We've taken actions around drunk driving to curtail drunk driving accidents with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. We're doing this on opioids now. It's hard. It's not easy. It's complicated. We haven't taken the same level of steps for this crisis that, as Sean said, is the #1 killer of children. And so I think, we want them to understand. But we work with a lot of those folks. I just think it is a complicated situation for them.
Yeah, Adam, I would say I think Saeed's suggestion would be dramatic and would have a profound impact. But I could also see why, if you are one of those parents, why you may not want to step out and be the poster child for this. I can see that would be hard to do. Not the trauma that your family already is facing, right? And then to say, okay, I'll go out and take all the shots that are, excuse the pun, but I mean, all the criticism that I'll get from one side, right, for doing this. And then I could see that would be hard, but it certainly would be impactful if you had families who say, don't do this, here's what happened to us, right? Well, good. Okay, so I think I get the point that what you're trying to do is at least tackle one thing at a time. And one of the most important things now is to perhaps get some sort of legislation that would mandate secure storage of firearms in homes. Is that what you're going after? And if there is a bill that is about to be launched, let me know about it. Send it to me as soon as you can. And even if we don't have the number or anything, at least let me know who's sponsoring it and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Will do.
Any other questions from our editorial board? Then I'll offer to the CeaseFire PA a final statement to make sure we're clarified, that there's nothing confusing. But otherwise, I do want to thank you for being here. Any final statements from our friends at CeaseFire PA? Go ahead, Carla.
Just real briefly to the previous question, I'm going to share some information in the chat about Deadly by Design. It's a project of CeaseFire PA's Education Fund, and it has some videos from families and communities who have been impacted by gun violence in Pennsylvania. I think it speaks a little bit to your point, Saeed, but not quite the image that you were sharing, but that's just a jumping off point for continued conversation on how we can spread this word and share the perspectives of those impacted. And I'll send it right now.
Right. And I do see, I had not seen this from Reverend Sprouts. Have all the internal issues at the NRA been helpful? Does that, she's wondering if because of all of the controversy surrounding the NRA, have some of their power been weakened, that you might be able to make some more inroads?
think we have seen other gun rights organizations rise that I would argue, and I think they would agree with me, are more extreme than even the NRA. You know, in Pennsylvania, we don't see as much, I would say, from the NRA. We see more from Gun Owners of America and the Pennsylvania Firearms Association and others. And they really, you know, they would say live in a space of no compromise where, you know, they fully believe that even now we have too strong of gun safety laws despite the horrific toll that we're experiencing. And so, you know, that has not shifted as much. At the same time, we have seen that when votes get held on bills like we did last session, there's bipartisan support because people recognize of all political stripes that we have to do something about prices. And none of these policies that, you know, impact your Second Amendment rights, your ability to own a gun. But what they do is they focus on keeping people safe, including our children.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been a most important conversation to have, and I think we will go forward with urging that we take it seriously, and that we support efforts for secure storage. So, with that, I will thank CeaseFire PA and thank our editorial board for taking time out of a busy day, and get ready for our next meeting that'll be coming up soon. All right. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you all so very much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank
Take
you
care.
all.
Have a great
y'all.
day.